Welcome back to another episode of Dad Bod Fantasy Squad. I am here with Robbie. Bobby, what's up, dude?
Dude, we are here to tell the listeners what we have coming up. We are here to bring you the best fantasy football personalities from around the NFL to break down each squad for you, the viewers. We want you to win your league, and these are the guests that are going to bring you the insight that no one else will.
So stay tuned. We have 8 of these coming out for you guys, and enjoy. We have a very special guest joining us to kick off our divisional episode. He is known in the community as the Fantasy Football Expo Godfather, creator of the Big Guy Fantasy Sports, and is author to 6-time nominated Best Fantasy Football publication by the FSWA. Here to share his My Guys for the season, it's Bob Lung. Bob, long time no see. We missed you at the Expo. How are you?
I missed you guys at the Expo. Yeah, it was a great time, as you probably have heard multiple times, a million times over. But the highlight of the weekend was Des Bryant playing flag football, man.
He just destroyed everyone.
If you saw nothing else, if you were in a drunken stupor the entire weekend and saw nothing else, just watching him just destroy people as the quarterback, and that was the key. Like, everybody's like, I'm going to guard Des. I'm going to guard Des. And then Des comes out, and he's left-handed. And he was just zinging. He was dropping dimes like his name was Danny. I mean, he was like, now granted, let's be honest. I don't know who the other guys were. They were not professional football players, but they played some ball at some point. Amazingly fast. Like the first play from scrimmage. I have a very good friend. His name's Bobby Cables. And I don't know if you know who he is, but beast of guy. Like his arms are like the size of my waist. Works out all the time, just a beast, you know. And of course, I love Bobby, but he thinks he's a badass because he is. But the first play, the video, you have to watch it because within 3 steps, the guy is blown by Bobby, and Bobby's turning with this panicked look on his face because the guy is gone. And Des just lobs it up for an easy first play touchdown. I went, it's going to be a long day, folks.
Man, I wish I saw that.
I think we were all surprised to see Des play quarterback and did a pretty good job. I didn't throw any interceptions, threw 4 touchdowns in 6 games or 5 games or whatever it was. And he says he's coming back, and he said one of the greatest days of his life. So I'm like, okay, sure. I mean, he didn't win a Super Bowl, so. I didn't say that to him.
He won the flag football Super Bowl. That's all that matters.
I think that's what. Yeah, he got a ring. We want to get one of those badass trophy smack rings. You know, like
yeah.
But no,
he's been talking about it. I've been
a super time, but that was definitely a highlight. And if he comes back, it'd be interesting to see if he brings somebody else like T.O. or something with him. Who knows?
That'd be cool. Yeah, I've been seeing a ton of people planning trips already for next year. So. Yeah, next year's expo is going to be even bigger.
Now we can only get the local people to show up. I'm not joking. 80% of the people that come to this event are from out of state. You know, I always feel like they're the ones missing out, not me. Yeah. You go, you know. So it is what it is, and it's a blast. It's fun to put together. It's fun to see the excitement and the thrill and how excited people are afterwards and before, during, and after. And I mean, no way I'm going to stop this. So anyway, that's enough.
I love to hear about it. It's kind of, it's really interesting. I know that last year I was like, oh my gosh. And I say this, and I know it's been brought up because I've heard other people mention, I was like, that would be so cool to have like a charity golf event go on like Friday day or like the Thursday.
It's already been discussions.
Yeah, like
Twitter is already. Somebody asked me, and I think it's already been all over Twitter of trying to do a Friday morning golf tournament. I'm like, as long as somebody else runs it, I'm perfectly fine with it.
That'd be fun.
Don't put it on me.
Robbie, you ready?
Me and Mario will step in. We'll take this over.
We're your local people, so if they're not local, we'll be the foot soldiers.
Yeah, I love the idea. Heck, somebody wants to put on a pickleball tournament. So.
Oh man, that's great.
Speaking of old dad bods, there we go. That's a pickleball.
Yeah, that's exactly where we're heading right there. Pickleball and golf, really.
Yeah, right.
So we wanted to bring you on because you mentioned in the tweet, you're talking about, hey, I got my consistency guide ready, which is out. You have it posted, pinned to your Twitter right now. So if you guys haven't checked it out, check it out. Well, we want to talk about your my guys on the season. We had you on last year to kind of give your my guys, and we wanted to kind of get into your my guys. So from each position, QB, running back, wide receiver, tight end. With that being said, do you want to go off with a QB that you really like this year?
Certainly do, and he's on many of my teams. His name is Justin Herbert. Just 2 years ago, he was third in consistency, third in total points. Last year, with bad ribs, missing probably more than half the games, he missed either Mike Williams and or Keenan Allen. So he's throwing to second and third string, fourth string receivers, and he still ended up ranked 8th in total points and 11th consistency with that whole scenario. Now he's back. He's healthy. They're healthy. They have Kellen Moore now as their OC, not Joe Lombardi, who likes to throw the ball deep. So, I mean, and here's the thing. It's his value. There's the big four. There's Allen, Hurts, Mahomes, and Burrow, all going round 2s, 3s, 4s at the latest. Burrow's going 4 now because of the injury. Guess what? Justin Herbert's always in the 5th round. So I can load up on the 3 receivers or 2 running backs, 2 receivers, whatever, get that core consistent talent at the key positions. Then I can get Justin Herbert in the 5th round, not have to pay up, not have to lose in one of those top running backs or wide receivers. And I think Herbert is going to be right there again in that top 5, maybe a lot closer, if not in the top 4, as he was just a couple years ago. So yeah, he's on a lot of my teams.
I love that so much. He was one of the guys in our crew claimed him before I could. But I think also with if you're a person that likes to stack your guys, you could do multiple stacks with Justin Herbert. You could do the Keenan Allen. You don't have to be in the first 5 picks. You can do the Quentin Johnson later. You could do the Gerald Everett if that, like, there's Mike so Williams, many different stacks. Mike Williams. There's so many stacks that you can do with Justin Herbert that you can't necessarily do with all QBs. So that's also a side benefit there.
And he won't be one of my receivers, but I will say, as much as I love Keenan Allen, he's Mr. Consistency. He's also 31 years old. The reason he was so consistent last year until he got hurt was because Herbert could not throw the ball deep because of the bad ribs. And that's not Joe Lombardi's thing. Kellen Moore loves to throw the ball deep. And so now I feel like I'm going to wait 3 rounds and get Mike Williams instead of Keenan Allen, because I feel like Mike Williams will have the better year for the first time. And the funny thing is, for the first time, like, since Mike Williams has come out, he's not getting like this ridiculous love that he used to get. Every year he was ADP was always close to, if not higher than Keenan Allen's, and he never got to that level. Now I think he will get to that level. Got to stay healthy, because of the fact that they can push the ball deep, and Herbert can do that and is healthy enough to do that. So definitely that's the add-on, the French fries to the Justin Herbert Big Mac.
I love it, Bob. That's a great take. I think the Mike Will, Keenan Allen kind of comparison and the ADP issues that we're seeing with Mike Williams' ADP dropping because of those injury concerns and what happened last year with how Herbert couldn't really throw the ball as effective downfield. It makes a ton of sense, and I'm in for it. How about a running back, Bob? Who you got? Who you got some love for this year with the running back position?
I have quite a few, but I think the one I'm going to focus on with this one, and he is on a lot of my teams. So again, he's been my guy because of the way, again, I've been drafting. So again, focusing on early top wide receivers, maybe a running back in there. I've done a lot of 3 in a row wide receivers, 1 running back. Sometimes I just get, like I said, Justin Herbert, or maybe I get Dallas Goedert in the 4th and 5th round. But the guy that's falling and always seems to be sitting right there for me is Alexander Madison. And it's funny because he's getting 0 love, right? Because all people want to see is somebody run. Jaylen Warren now is taking over the Pittsburgh backfield because he had a 62-yard touchdown run. And I love how preseason hype just destroys, the good, strong veterans. Like, one of my other players that's close to Madison is Najee Harris. Najee Harris is going to be the guy. Yes, Jaylen Warren will spell him at times, but unless, Najee Harris gets hurt, I don't see Jaylen Warren cutting into as much as everybody is hyping it to be. But my guy is Alexander Madison, and here's why. he's been a backup to Dalvin Cook for years. He's finally getting that opportunity. Well, if he wasn't that good, then why wouldn't the Vikings be out there trying to either draft somebody, pick somebody up on waivers? There's Leonard Fournette. There's, all these good players out there.
Kareem Hunt. Yeah.
Kareem Hunt. Right. Exactly. Here's why. Because in the games where Madison played and got at least 13 carries or more, he averaged 22.3 fantasy points a game and is 100% consistent over the last 2 years. That's why. So the fact that he can fall to people in the 6th round as your RB1 after you've drafted, Jamar Chase, with Calvin Ridley and Deebo Samuels, which I've done multiple times. And then I can get Alexander Madison and an Aaron Jones, as well as another guy that's kind of in that range that I'm like, okay, I'll take him. So Madison's been my guy. So many teams just because of his value and the fact that Minnesota doesn't seem to be concerned with him getting the ball all the time.
Yeah, you see me smiling. It's because Alexander Madison, you're crushing him. It's so exciting to see him come out there and if you look at nothing else, you want a running back that is going to project for, 250 plus. It's kind of like why Robbie is in on Miles Sanders and
Miles Sanders is actually on my list as well.
I love him this year.
You want that work, especially at the RB1, maybe even RB2 position. So I can't see it any other way. I haven't seen much from any of the guys in the Minnesota backfield. I always see the Ty Chandler love or the I'm never going to be able to say his name. Kine, I won't know his last name, and then even Dwayne McBride. But none of them have done anything to excite you. But Alexander Madison has shown, in those where he gets the 13. Carries, I want to say most, if not all, are where he has 50% snaps, and he just looks great. He just looks so good.
Yeah. Well, let me make Rob smile here for a minute. So here's my write-up for Miles Sanders and my consistently undervalued players. I said if you just took his rushing yards and you just kept those, which was whatever it was, 1,000, 1,200 yards. I said, and you just add 4 rushing touchdowns to last year's total. Because remember, he wasn't allowed to touch the ball at the goal line because that's Jalen Hurts' job.
No one ever thinks
and Jalen Hurts doesn't check down. So let's give Miles Sanders 30 catches and then put that all together. Guess what? He's top 7 in total points.
Yeah. No, he
never scored any touchdowns and they never did any checkdowns out of the backfield. Well, if they do that in Carolina, which I'm assuming they would, with a rookie quarterback, how does Miles Sanders not be top 15? He's like RB 24 if that even that high anymore. So yeah, I love Miles Sanders too. He's on a few of my teams, not as many as Madison, but definitely in there.
Yeah, no, Miles is on my list this year for sure. He's one of my favorites to get. I think he's grossly undervalued right now for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I had a team, my home league, that I just got both of these back. So this is all too weird for me right now. But keeping us moving here, who is your favorite wide receiver this year? Who's your my guy wide receiver?
My guy wide receiver, and it's not even close, is AJ Brown. And where I really freak people out is when I'm drafting in the middle to late first round. You will see that AJ Brown's ADP is probably, I forget, maybe it's wide receiver 10, 12, somewhere in there. But the problem with that is that that's the end of the first round or beginning of the second. So when I'm picking in the middle and I'm let's say 7th or 8th, somewhere in there, Kelsey's probably not going to fall to me. Most of the top receivers aren't going to get there. Eckler will be gone. McCaffrey will be gone. And I'm sitting there, so I have to decide. It's usually going to be Stephon Diggs, CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown,
Devontae Adams, probably.
Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Those 4. And every time I look at those 4, I go, sorry, I'm taking AJ Brown, because I say they're like, why would you do that? And I said, well, because the last 8 games of last season, he was 100% consistent with Jalen Hurts. If he can get to that point and be 90% consistent this year, then he's a first round pick easily a first round pick. And now I don't have to worry about missing him if I do. Now, if I'm at the back end and he falls to me at 12, then I'm just as giddy as I would be getting him at 8.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just, so some of the big experts drafts, Kings Classics, FSGAs, some of those big drafts where, I'm playing against the Howard Benders, Bob Harris's, and, the world. I think I did that. It was the FSGA one in Cleveland when they had the conference in June, and I was the 7th pick. Kelsey went right in front of me. And I said AJ Brown, and like there was this gasp across the room, and I was like, what? And they're like, oh, you didn't take Devontae Adams, you didn't take Stephon Diggs. And I'm like, I'm sorry, did you forget about that these two are pissed off at their teams right now?
Yeah.
Not enough talk about that.
I mean, do we really trust Dak Prescott without Kellen Moore as the OC?
That's where we differ, Bob. That's where we differ.
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
I love me some
I'm going to stay with AJ Brown and the team that went to the Super Bowl and the team that's trying to get to the Super Bowl again. And I'm all for that. So yeah, he's on a lot of my teams.
I love that. It's the comment about the CD Lamb thing. It's just too. You just hit. I swear, I know I sound like a broken soundboard, but you're just hitting home too much on some of these comments.
Yeah.
That's good. That's you got Robbie all ruffled up there. Tight ends. Where are we going, Bob?
Well, just like at the quarterback position with Justin Herbert, this guy is just last year was super consistent. And then got hurt in week 12. His name is Dallas Goedert. And yes, that means I have 2 Philadelphia Eagles in most of my teams, at least 2. But I'm okay with that because that's a very high-powered offense. But he was 89% consistent through the first 9 games. And, he definitely was syncing very well with Jalen Hurts. He wasn't going to put up this. He doesn't put up the same points as Kelsey. I get that. But once you get past Kelsey, Andrews, Hawkinson, I mean, all of these guys who are going much higher than Goddard. And again, the thing with Goddard is he's going around 6, where Hawkinson and Kittles and Wallers and, of course, Kelsey and Andrews are going 2, 3, 4, 5. Again, I want to get my quarterback in round 5, usually Herbert. And then, round 6 is that decision of is first off, is there anybody ahead of Goddard in the picks? Like if it's, it's Kyle Pitts and Goddard's left, then I'm going to take Goddard, but if there's still Kittle and Hawkinson, which I've been in some drafts, if it's not tight end premium, some people just like, well, once you get past Kelsey, who cares? Yeah. But, like I said, so I usually kind of sit there and kind of judge, can I go one more round and push it? I've missed out once or twice where somebody then snapped him before I got to him. But yeah, Goddard, like I said, I really like him in that team. Yeah, it's, maybe a little much because I've got him and AJ Brown, but they were both very productive through the first 9 games together. So I don't think that should change. It's just such a good team, such a good offense. Their running backs are kind of a hot mess, between, are we starting Gainwell? Are we starting, who are we starting? Gainwell? Are we starting Sherrod Penny? Is it DeAndre Swift? Is it, blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, just throw it to AJ Brown and Goddard and you'll be fine. So that's what I've been going with. If I miss out on Goddard, my super late guy that nobody seems to care anything about, I don't even know if his own mother would draft him, is Tyler Higbee. But I don't understand why, because Tyler Higbee, before Stafford got hurt, was 100% consistent when Stafford was playing. He was averaging, I think, was it 12 targets a game during those?
The targets were insane. The targets were so insane.
Yeah, and yet he's like tight end 16 or something. Yeah, it's ridiculous. I draft him like round 12, and then I'll back him up and get Irv Smith Jr., which is my hey, if you're going to get Higbee, get somebody else just to be safe. And I like Irv Smith in Cincinnati as well, but Goddard's my guy. And if I miss out on him, then it's usually Higbee and Irv Smith rounds 12, 14 or something. So.
And I don't know if it was so there's 2 Robs on our show and one we call Norton. I don't know if it was Norton or this Rob next to me. They talk about Philadelphia and like the RPO system in general, how it typically lends to a funneled offense. So if you look, I mean, just looking at, and I don't have Dallas Goedert's in front of me, but one time I questioned Rob on this. If you look at AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, I think they made up about 60% of his targets or 50% of Jalen Hurts. So like they funnel that offense.
It was probably higher than that.
Yeah, I think it was closer to 60 than 50.
Yeah, and with Goddard, which we in that specific conversation we weren't talking about, but with Goddard, it is probably closer to like 75% or 70%, whatever it may be. It's a very funneled offense because Jalen Hurts has that run pass option. Like it goes to first read, second read, third read.
Yeah, and if he looks at AJ, Devontae Smith, and Goddard, and they're not open, he's running. Like I said, he doesn't check the ball down to running backs. So he's off. He's off to the races. So, yeah, it's a 1, 2, 3, I'm out.
Yep. Well, Bob, we want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and make this as a special appearance. And obviously, you hold a special place in our heart because you've always been really kind to us. You got us involved in the expo late last year. So you've always been somebody that's offering a lending hand to us. So we truly, truly do appreciate you. And we appreciate everything you do for the expo.
Well, I got the dad bod to go with it. So it's all
honorary member.
Yeah. Please, if you don't mind, take some time here to kind of plug anything you have coming up, your Twitter or whatever else you would like to plug in here.
Yeah. So the season's coming up very close, but hey, it's almost draft season. Today's Wednesday. I don't know if it'll go out today or tomorrow or whatever. But hey, get that consistency guide. Go to Amazon, get the Fantasy Football Consistency Guide. It'll get there in 2 days if you're a Prime member, so you can get it for the weekend. But if not, if your drafts are Labor Day weekend or whatever, you got some time. I know that's all big draft week as well. Check that out. Get it on there. Make sure then you go to the website and use the coupon code. And for $10, you can get access to all the consistency tools all season. And, of course, you can get the updated tier draft list as well just by emailing me after you get the book. So you can be ready for your draft. Take one sheet of paper. That's all you're going to need to go to your draft, and it will get you through your draft this coming weekend. And then follow BigGuyFantasySports.com the whole fall. Again, membership, very simple, very small. But you get all that consistency. We update the stats every week so you can see how consistent the players are on an ongoing basis. So if you're looking at a guy and go, man, this guy seems to be scoring a lot of points, not helping my team, you can look right there. Ooh, 50% consistent. Yeah, he's not helping me. Trade him off, get somebody who's more consistent, and then your team will start improving greatly after that, I promise. So, guys, thank you again for having me. Of course, I kind of begged you to put me on, but that's okay. It's all right. It's all good. But no, miss you guys.
It is always an open invite.
I'll make sure I hit you guys up and we'll say hi or whatever, have a beer.
Definitely, dude. We will get together soon. And Bob, we greatly appreciate it. You are one of our favorite people, and we will have you on sooner than later, buddy. I promise you that.
I love it. Yep. All right, guys. Thanks so much.
Next on, we have the host of Sports Gambling Network Fantasy Football Podcast, the senior dynasty analyst at SGPN Fantasy. He's an expert consensus ranker, FSWA member. Check out him on Twitter at Dynasty Dorks. He's here to talk about the Indianapolis Colts. It's the one and only Dave Heilman. Dave, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're super excited to get you here.
Appreciate that. You know, you guys, we're best friends. We're in Dynasty League together.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
That's true. Yeah.
We're doing a little startup dynasty as we speak. I think it's round 3 or something.
We're coming up on the board here soon, Rob.
Yeah, we're coming up. We might have to draft while you're on. But we had some big departures for the Colts. We got Paris Campbell, Matt Ryan, obviously, some big defensive players. Some key additions, Gardner Minshew, Isaiah McKenzie, Pharaoh Brown, and then Anthony Richardson and Downs from the draft. So what are your expectations for the Colts this season?
Yeah, I think the Colts, I love the addition of the coaching staff. You know, no matter what quarterback went here, it was going to be exciting. Obviously, Anthony Richardson was a nice pairing, but Shane Steichen, with his work that he's done with Philadelphia, but he also was a longtime Chargers assistant coach as well as a quarterback coach and offensive coordinator. He did a great job with Philip Rivers, great job with Justin Herbert, and then the way that they deployed the offense in Philadelphia, I think you're going to see something similar. I don't think you're going to see the same thing, but you're going to see something similar as far as the approach and how they use that. They're going to utilize their strengths, which is their offensive line. and their running game, which is Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, and good luck.
Yeah,
I mean, that's a tough combo right there for any defense, as long as they can get Jonathan Taylor to play this year.
You bring up such a good point, because not only are you trying to stop Jonathan Taylor, you're talking about the dude that is got the frame of Jonathan Taylor and a half, almost like he's 6'4" or something, big. He's like Cam Newton and Anthony Richardson. So when we look at this offense, Gardner Minshew seems to be the kind of competent bridge QB that they're looking for, with a career passer rating of 93. I have a two-part question here. Do you think Gardner Minshew gets the start this season, or if not, or if so, when do you see Anthony Richardson taking over the weekly job?
Day one. So they've already talked about how Richardson's already taken snaps with the ones in camp. But they've already said that, to enjoy the good stuff, you got to go through the bad. And that's how Shane Steichen's talking about this. So I don't see any reason. I don't have their bye week circled or anything like that. But honestly, I would say Anthony Richardson's going to start day one.
Dude, and I think there's a lot of people that feel that way. Obviously, even one of our guys, Norton, he talks about Anthony Richardson and the upside that he brings, and I think he's got him ranked as high as QB 10. So you told us pre-show that you were at the media day for the draft. What was one of the favorite things that you got to hear from Anthony Richardson? Because you told us you got to speak to him or hear him quite a bit that day.
Yeah, and so it was at the NFL Combine. I get to be part of the media session for all the quarterback, all the fantasy positions. And so with Anthony Richardson, I'll say as far as the interview, he nailed the interview. I thought personality really stuck out, and you got a lot from him that was like, okay, he's a dude. But standing next to him, so I'm not a big guy. I'm 5'5". I walked by Bryce Young, and it was like you're walking by a normal guy in the street. I was standing there, and Anthony Richardson was getting interviewed next to me, and I looked over at his elbow, and I was like, holy, who is that? I thought it was a defensive player. He's got a melon for a head. He's just a huge guy. And then you go into the stadium during the combine, and you're really supposed to not clap, not cheer, do anything to distract the players. And then when Anthony Richardson was out there, it was they were cheering him on, and he's going they're like, screw it. Everybody was, but he was the only guy. So he took over. And so I walked away from that, and awesome. I said, there's no way he's going to get past the Indianapolis Colts. With people were just drooling over this guy. And so I'm like, he's going to go top 5, no doubt after that. And it was just the charisma. Obviously he nailed the workout, and just a physical freak. And, you talk about a type, the Colts have a type, and that is athletic freaks. Yeah. And so you look at their draft, and Daniel Jeremiah, he talked to the GM, and he texted him, was like, this is literally the most athletic draft I've ever seen. And so the relative athletic score, all their guys aced the charts on it, from their corner they got, from Richardson, from Downs, really, really athletic draft class. And they have very much a plan with this draft.
Yeah, dude. So it was great seeing him on TV too. I don't know if you even got to see this or if you saw the clip afterwards, but there was the clip of him, his mom, and his brother. And his brother is probably our height, 5'6", 5'7" already. And he's like, hey, I think he's 12. And I don't know if it was one of the fake tattoos or if it was a real one, but he had a neck tattoo, and he had this deep Anthony Richardson-like voice. They sounded like twins. Quick, one more question about Anthony Richardson, because we talked about how you think he's going to start week 1, day 1. Are you in on the top 12 QB here for the season with his rushing upside? Do you think he can do it?
No, you still have to pass the ball. And so you look back at what quarterbacks from a rookie standpoint were able to, to be quarterback ones. There's not many. And, Justin Herbert happened to be one with Shane Steichen because of the Tyrod Taylor thing. But he also he had 5 rushing touchdowns, about 250, 300 rushing yards, but he threw the ball 4,000 yards.
Yeah.
Like, you have to do that. So, like, I look more like people are going to want to say, like, it's going to be a Jalen Hurts kind of a season, like Jalen Hurts last year. I'm looking more of like Jalen Hurts when he took over, or like Justin Fields. Justin Fields last year would be great, but maybe Justin Fields the year before. This guy started 13 games. He's thrown like I gotta look at PFF again, but he's literally completed like 25 passes above like 20 yards. Like he's so new, and so like. Even if he runs for 800 yards and has 10 rushing touchdowns, he's going to have to still throw for 3,000 and 20 pat touchdowns.
That's about right.
To creep into it. And so I'm looking at Mike Clay's projections. Mike Clay has him projected for just under 3,000 passing, 29 and 16, 15 passing touchdowns. And then for the rushing, he's got 110 attempts, 606 yards, 5 touchdowns, and that's QB 21.
Yeah.
That's right in line where I got him.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, like I think when you talk about that, you really talk about there's in the past 10 years or so, there's been one type of QB, like the same type of QB, Cam Newton, but he threw well, and he threw a ton at Auburn, he threw a ton at Florida. So like it's different. So I hear you.
Yeah, man. And Dave, like you said, we kind of brought this up a little earlier with the Jonathan Taylor drama circling the team. A lot of news coming out left and right from that. What do you think they're ultimately going to do with Jonathan Taylor? Do you think they're going to get a deal done, or is it going to be a long kind of off season with this guy?
A long month.
Yeah, they're handling it poorly, and their owner,
to say the least.
Yeah, their owner. I mean, he's like, listen, if Jonathan Taylor died, nobody would miss him.
It's such a terrible thing to say, man.
I don't know. Like, there's always quotes that are misquoted or taken out of context, but it's really hard to take that out of context. Like, it's just like, shut up. Like, don't say that stuff. Like, take his phone. Yeah, like and so it's gonna make Jonathan Taylor dig in more. And my concern with that is you have a new offense, you have a rookie quarterback. Mm-hmm. And then what happens when players miss camp or miss time? They typically get injured. You get soft tissue injuries. It's working out privately and being at an NFL practice are not the same thing.
No.
And so that's definitely my concern. So I put out a post earlier today, like, how far are you dropping Josh Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor in your rankings? Where like you're looking at the board and going, all right, I got question marks with them, but I don't have question marks about this other guy. Like, like how far does it go? Do they drop out of the top 10?
Yeah, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, kind of safer plays that you can get at. I mean, that they're going after him right now, where you can probably get them and feel a lot safer.
And with ECR's dropping them. You look at the ECR, Jacobs is 10. I think Taylor dropped to 8.
And I was surprised, in just real quick, Rob, before you ask the next question, I was surprised that he went in it was kind of the early second in our dynasty still. I was real shocked by that because that's close to where he has gone in all startups, is right around the early second. So I was like, woo.
Yeah, I don't think someone's going to trade him because you're going to have somebody that gives something for him. And even if they give like a 6th round pick, like DeAndre Swift, they're not going to like, okay, we're going to get Jonathan Taylor for a 6th rounder and he's just going to play for us. No, he wants the bag. And so they're going to have to pony up. And so you look at teams like the Bears have a ton of money. Like that's like an option. Yeah. But do the Bears want to do that? Like they've got I wouldn't say a great backfield, but they got a nice little collection of running backs for very cheap. And if that's their model, they're not going to go pay he wants like $16 million. He wants like a Christian McCaffrey contract.
Yeah, man. And let's say that they work out a deal and he gets some work in the offseason and he's coming in week 1 ready to go. With Anthony Richardson being there, how productive do you think JT is going to be? There's going to be a lot of different things. We know that, with rushing quarterbacks like Richardson, they don't really dump the ball down as much as a regular pocket pass quarterback does. Are you concerned about him just productive-wise, even if he's there week 1?
He's not necessarily catching a lot of balls before that. So, someone like Austin Eckler, I'd be concerned, where like that's the primary part of his game. it's not the primary part of his game. And so, like, again, looking at Mike Clay's projections, Mike Clay's got him as RB4. This is before all this madness, and this is July perfect, But, like, I would say, like, top 6, top 7, if he's ready to go week 1, because you don't have that, but you also have very high efficiency because teams are having to worry about Anthony Richardson. And so you have a lot of that. And so people will say, okay, well, Anthony Richardson is going to take all of the red zone work. And he's going to take some of it, but, like, we're not going to see, what Jalen Hurts did all the time. And the reason it doesn't happen, I mean, what happened? Jalen Hurts had to play all playoffs with a busted shoulder because they were using him like a fullback.
Yeah, I love what you said there, Dave. He necessarily doesn't do his damage in the pass game. Like, he gets some 30, 40 targets a season, catches a season, but that's not really his primary role in this offense. Now let's kind of flip that question the other way. Let's do a 180. Let's say this thing gets super ugly. Jonathan Taylor sits out. They put him on the NFI, or they end up trading him. What's this backfield look like behind him? And who's kind of the guy you want?
It's a mess. And so I know that, like, I'm in a bunch of chats and stuff talking about Scott Fish, and a lot of people were, like, really excited about Evan Hull. And like, rookie fever is a real thing. Like, I don't know.
I feel it all the time.
I don't know if Evan Hull is going to be good. And I think he's, PFF grades him better as, like, a receiving back. And he's really kind of mid when you look at the metrics and stuff like that. And a guy that I thought was really under the radar because no one was talking about him was Zach Moss. Zach Moss was really good last year after they acquired him, and they used him over Deion Jackson. And so I had Moss as my last pick in Scott Fishbowl. Everybody's going after Evan Hull. I went Zach Moss. Well, he broke his arm, and now he might not be ready for week 1, might be ready for week 1, but miss some time. So it points to Deion Jackson. And so I would say Deion Jackson, who's, he had hit or miss. He had like an RB1 overall performance, and it was like, okay, we're great. Put him in a lineup, and the next week, like, RB48. So, and it's a new offense, stuff like that. But Deion Jackson's where I would go over Evan Hull. And I don't know if they add somebody. Like, this team,
I think they do.
I don't. They might, but I don't. What is this team expecting to do this year?
That's a good point. That's a good point. Like, why sign a guy to 1 year?
Yeah, like what is signing like Ezekiel Elliott going to do for the Indianapolis Colts other than spend money? So like, I think they stick with what they got. Maybe if somebody gets dropped and they can pick somebody up off waivers, like what happened with James Robinson and the Giants or something. But yeah, I just don't think anything's going to happen, and I think Deion Jackson is where I would go. And what I like about Deion is you've seen it. Yeah. Evan Hull, we haven't seen it. It's a cool story, and the whole running the ball to the end zone every time was awesome. But like, I would go Deion Jackson. We've seen it, and we've seen him be able to like do both the rushing and the receiving, where Zach Moss is more just a pure runner.
Yeah. And I think that I picked up Deion Jackson in a ton of dynasty leagues, but obviously that's my main concern is like when he dominated, he had a ton of catches, and Matt Ryan was easily checking down to him a ton. So like, but he's young. He's kind of a raw athletic prospect himself. And I mean, there's a chance he develops a better rushing game if he's given the opportunity. But when we talk the receiving game for this offense, we've seen some guys really drop compared to last year. I mean, Michael Pittman is currently going outside of the top 30 wide receivers. Alec Pierce probably had more hype as a rookie than he does this season. Is there any upside with either of those guys?
I'm not interested in any of the pass catchers. If Pittman keeps dropping, then like, yeah, you could, but like, it's going to be really hard to get consistent production. I know he's the number 1 on the offense. And if Richardson throws for 3,000 yards, you're going to get some production. But like 15 touchdowns is what he's projected with 15 games or 16 games. I don't see it being much more than that. Yeah. So like if Pittman's being drafted as, wide receiver 36, how much
upside
profit are you going to get on that? Like, I get him at RB 36 and he ended up finishing RB 35.
Yeah. No,
I think your ceiling ends up being something around T-Max season last year where it's like a wide receiver 23, 24. I think that becomes your ceiling because he's a guy that didn't score a ton of touchdowns.
And at the end of the day, like, I don't look at end of season totals and judge a guy. Like, was I able to, how many weeks was I able to put this guy in my lineup? Like, how many times we see guys like, man, this guy finished up as wide receiver 13. It's like, he was wide receiver 13 or better twice. He's not wide receiver.
That's a great point. Not a lot of people do that.
That's a Kirk Cousins story right there.
Yeah, it is, man. That's something not enough people kind of look at is, you get those 2 or 3 big boom games. That's why I'm just never in on Kittle for that reason, because you'll get that 2 or 3 big boom games where it jumps his season total up to tight end 4, tight end 5. But then you look at the rest of the games and he's outside the top 12. So he's not producing for you in the rest of those weeks.
Yeah. And there's an easy way to do it. If you go to Fantasy Pros and you go to their like fantasy football leaders, it'll let you sort, and then you can put average, and then you can go from there. You got to pay for PFF and you can do some stuff on there. But what I say is, look at how they ranked. And I would say they had to at least play like 10 or 12 games, because you're going to get these random guys like, I forget those quarterbacks, but like Davis Webb.
I mean, Sam Howell is one of them that was like QB4 on average, or QB6 or something like that.
Yeah,
he played one
Davis Webb, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I did have one more question about this receiving game. Josh Downs is somebody that I was super excited for when watching his highlights and seeing how explosive he is. He really is. His biggest knock is his size, and that's what a lot of people have that's why he fell to the 3rd round. So he's definitely already sparking some excitement in training camp. 2-part question again here. What was it like meeting him and talking with him, and what are you expecting from him? I want to change this to, what are you expecting from him from a dynasty standpoint? Because if you're not expecting much from Pittman this year, I don't expect you to necessarily look at Downs and be like, yeah, I'm all in on Downs this season.
Yeah, like Downs and Pierce, they're more like best ball, maybe like late, but like no redraft interest. But yeah, he was cool. I mean, he wore a beanie. He was small guy. Real small guy. But real nice guy, and he knew that he was going to have to hear a lot of questions about the same stuff, about his size, about press coverage, and those things. So he'll play in the slot, so he's not going to get a lot of. But like, if you look at his history, he's not played a lot of bump and run. He's not he's not gotten a lot of press coverage, and so like if they moved him outside, I would have concerns because he's not done that before. But in the slot, I think he'll be very good. He reminds me a lot of a T.Y. Hilton kind of a player, and he goes to Indy on a super fast field. And, I think he could be the deep ball threat that Richardson needs. Got a nice deep ball. And you could see that play action off of Jonathan Taylor or, Anthony Richardson. And I think that's your guy. And Alec Pierce as well for the same reasons. But I like the fact that he's in the slot. You see a lot of quick, like, fantasy production from slot receivers and good route runners versus like these athletic freaks. It takes them a little longer, and they're playing outside, and they're, kind of their targets are a little bit further down the field, when these other guys, like, they're in the slot. It's like, that's a real quick, like, let's go. And then Downs is a guy that could literally take a, 5-yard slant to the house.
He's an exciting player. Is there anybody else that we should be keeping an eye on on this season for redraft purposes from this offense?
No, I mean, it's pretty much Anthony Richardson, Jonathan Taylor, and Anthony Richardson only in your super flex leagues. Like, I wouldn't mind him being like my quarterback 2 or 3 and shooting for that, because he does have top 12 upside. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'd say it's not likely. And so, is your 2nd or 3rd quarterback, and you have Kirk Cousins, like, that's a great combination.
That's our what we've been kind of promoting, like the Kirk Cousins, maybe Dak, something like that.
Yeah, your floor and upside combination there. Like last year, I got Justin Fields as my, like, we'll see what happens quarterback, and won some leagues. And so, the tight end position, unless you're in those weird 2 tight end leagues, I'm not interested. I mean, I have had, some pretty prominent people that have some interest in Jelani Woods. So Eric Moody was on the show. Marcus Grant was on the show. Both of them kind of alluded to, Jelani Woods as potential breakout candidate. But I just don't know if there's going to be enough food on the table for the receivers, let alone a tight end.
Yeah.
And so like Jelani Woods could be, you know, boom or bust, maybe a couple good weeks, and that's all I'm doing. But I got him at like tight end 28, 29.
Yeah, I think we're all. As a
I
group,
do
pretty
like
well
Will
with that.
Mallory from a deep dynasty stash standpoint. He's a
Okay.
guy that kind of like moves like a receiver, good lateral quickness, and he's 7th-round pick out of Miami. But he's an athletic tight end and a lot different than Jelani Woods. Like Jelani Woods is more of a straight line and a jump ball guy because he's just
Big.
a huge basketball player.
Huge, yeah.
But like this guy's got some lateral quickness and some wiggle to him after the catch.
I
They're
love
young.
that.
They're
Yeah.
young.
Super young team.
I
It's going to be a
love
tough go for him this year, but hopefully Anthony Richardson kind of sparks some interest back into this Indianapolis Colts team.
I think from a dynasty standpoint, Richardson is a sell right now because you can get so much for him, and I would use him to like up to get another tier. So if I had Anthony Richardson on my team right now, which I could have drafted today, took Anthony Richardson and then trade him plus something for a Joe Burrow, a Trevor Lawrence, something like that. Because I don't know if you're going to get all that this year, or you just wait and then halfway through the season when the person that said, man, Anthony Richardson can be Jalen Hurts, and he's not, and you're going to get a discount because people are just very fickle and just change their mind real quick.
They want everything right now.
He's going to be on our list if he's there at the end of the third.
Yeah, listen, I was about to pick him. I was trying to pretend that I was going to get Tua because my buddy's a big Dolphins fan. Then he made the trade with me, and then he ended up taking Breece Hall.
He wanted Breece.
Yeah, I could have did the Dak Prescott CeeDee Lamb stack too. I had all those.
I have that in one league.
If you're going to give me a 5th plus a 1st, all right, let's go.
Yeah,
Let's
I feel it.
And then, Dave, before we get you out of here, one question I ask all of the guests that we have had on this so far. Who are your plant the flag players this season? Who are the guys you're going out and
regardless of team
in every draft, regardless of team?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'll say a guy that I've been getting a lot at the quarterback position. I think he's a good quarterback too. Is Geno Smith. And so I just love the situation there. Like Jackson Smith and Jigba is your 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
I could probably name 6 teams where he's the number 1.
Yeah.
And he's the 3rd option. So I think Geno's set up for success. Perfect. You know, if you got Justin Fields and Geno Smith as your like super flex quarterbacks, you're in for a good season.
I love that call.
He's good. Running backs, I'll go with Alexander Madison.
Yes.
I just think he's going to be good this year.
I love it.
Yeah.
I do too.
I like that people are like trying to like outsmart the situation and say like
it's touches.
Yeah, it's all about touches. And so like again, Eric was on the show and or no, it was Marcus, and he said like everybody like instantly wanted a zag. And it's like just zig. Zig. And so his ADP, as long as it stays where it's at, I'm not
perfect.
Listen, I'm not taking him in the 3rd. But if he's falling to the 4th and 5th, like sign me up. I think he's going to get plenty of production, and he's been good. Again, we've seen it. And if you're excited about Tony Pollard, who finally got a shot, like you're not at all in on Alexander Madison, like I think Alexander Madison is going to be a perfect RB2 with RB1 upside for receivers. I'll say for tight ends, I think Darren Waller's going to be the number 1 on the Giants.
Second one.
Yeah.
Let's go.
As far as the receivers, it's a tough one, you know, because I'm always looking for value. Seeing what I could get. And of course I can say like, well, like, yeah, Garrett Wilson's my flag plant guy, but he's a low hanging fruit.
Yeah, he is because he's already going.
We've had some
wide receiver 10 or something.
Yeah,
but yeah, he's legit got wide receiver 1 upside, like V1 up. It's in the range of outcomes.
A little deeper cut, I guess, would be Keenan. Like, I just think people are forgetting how good Keenan Allen is.
I heard this too, man.
Yeah, and so like obviously Garrett Wilson, that was my first pick in our draft, but like or him or CD, I took them both. And but Keenan Allen, just people forget how good he was. And Justin Herbert he was the 2nd highest in passing yards last year, and people were like, he sucked last year. He had broken ribs and a busted shoulder and threw for 5,000 yards. Like, he's going to be good. They got Quentin Johnston now. They got Kellen Moore. I think they possibly could be in the market for a running back to add to that. Like, I think Zeke or Kareem Hunt could go there with Austin Eckler. But I think that's a fun offense, and Keenan Allen is a dog.
Yeah, dude. Wide receiver 4 from weeks 10 to 7 or 18 last season.
Yeah,
I mean, he was just good.
Yeah, and I think Justin Herbert is actually one of the QBs in this draft that still has good value, considering what we've seen from the QBs this season, or where they're going. Dave, we appreciate this so much, man. It was a blast. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for getting us in the Hayden Hurst Podathon. Before we let you go, if you don't mind letting the viewers know where they can find you, and if you have anything coming up, plug away.
Yeah. Cool. Dynasty Dorks on TikTok or X, Twitter, whatever it is. And it's SGPN Fantasy on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We do 2 Dynasty podcasts a week, and then we have other shows like IDP and Best Ball and things like that. So SGPN Fantasy on YouTube and Apple and all that good stuff.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. We really do appreciate it.
We appreciate you.
Cool. Appreciate it, guys. Hope you have a good one.
Thanks.
Next up, we have Mike Herrick coming on to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars. If you're not already, you can find Mike over on Twitter at Classic Mike GRFN. That's Classic Mike GRFN. And Mike is an analyst with Get Right Fantasy Network, which you can follow as well on Twitter at Get Right Fantasy. Mike, what's going on, man? Thank you so much for stopping by to talk Jags.
Oh, I'm excited, man. Let's get into it.
We definitely will. They had some major departures. Marvin Jones, Jawan Taylor, some of the big additions that they had, though, definitely outweigh those. Calvin Ridley, Tank Bigsby, Anton Harrison, Brenton Strange, a couple rookies, Parker Washington. So something that we ask all our guests to start with is, what are your expectations for this team in the upcoming season?
So last year, the Jags finished around 9-8. They were first in their division. They made the playoffs, and they beat the Chargers in the first round, 31-30. So they had an amazing finish. I mean, the Chargers scored 3 if you guys remember that game, it was 3 touchdowns in the beginning.
Oh,
Unanswered. It was crazy. And then all of a sudden they ended up scoring out the rest and ended up winning the game at the end of the whole thing. Then they go on to the division round and go against Kansas City, and they lost by 7. So they did a great job last season with the addition. First year with Doug Peterson as the head coach of this team. They're facing the NFC North this season, AFC North this season. They have a couple of tough games going against Kansas City again, Cincinnati, and of course for sure your Browns. So FanDuel has them at over under 9.5. I'm gonna say. I say about 10-7 this season.
Yeah, I agree with you. I love that call. Quickly, let's start with the guy who is
got out too.
Yeah, I know. I love that. It's funny you bring up that football game too, because it's always on NFL Network, and I've probably watched it like 4 or 5 times this offseason just because it's so good. Like I can't get enough of that game.
Oh yeah.
But let's talk about the main dude who's going to kind of lead this ship, Trevor Lawrence. We know he took a massive step forward last season after the Urban Meyer debacle, going to Doug Peterson. Do you see another step forward this season, kind of how Joey Burrow did it last year?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I definitely do. I mean, the offense was ranked 7th overall in yards per game. He was ranked 10th in passing offense, and the team was 9th in points per game. I mean, he has the same coach, the same coaching staff, general O-line, just minus, Cam Robinson for 4 games. But, they also added, like we said before, a young, talented Calvin Ridley, who's been out of the league for the last 2 years. He should be healthy to go. They also still have all their other weapons with Kirk, Zay Jones, and Evan Ingram. They had a receiving core that had over 4,000 yards last season. I do think that he can have a really, really good season this year.
Yeah, I love that. He finished QB 12 last year in points per game. He's going right around QB 8. Now, do you think that ADP kind of is right in line, or do you think we're paying a little bit high for the upside of what me and you both expect good seasons, but do you think that's a little high for the ADP?
No, I feel like Trevor is around the right price at the moment. He's falling about where Joe Burrow was last season in most situations, like 7th, 8th round. He could finish, I think. I mean, I have him ranked at QB 6, so it could be anywhere between QB 6 and QB 9. So, currently, I think that is definitely doable this year. I think he's right at where he needs to be.
There's some sneaky points that could come from T-Law's legs too. Like I wouldn't be surprised. Remember the years where Tannehill snuck into like the top, I think it was top 10, top 12 quarterbacks.
I think
because he added 6 touchdowns on the ground. And I could see T-Law kind of sneaking into that because really when you look at these running backs, they don't have huge bruisers, but there is somebody that you highlighted in the above top points that we talked about, which was Calvin Ridley. So a huge unknown right now with this team is how these target shares are going to break down with Calvin Ridley playing. How are you expecting them to shake out?
So right now, last year target breakdown was, Kirk had 133, Jones had 121, Ingram had 98, and then Marvin Jones now vacating only 81 targets. So the way I basically did it is I took all 4 of those targets, added them up, spread them out between everybody. In that case, it's 433 targets, roughly for all 4 of them to kind of play with. And in this case, if you spread that out evenly, it's 108 targets. Now we all know that that's not going to work. We know that one person is probably going to be a little bit more favored than others. I do think that I do think that Ridley might be that guy. So I think he'll probably get the lion's share of things at like 120. I have him at 120. I have Kirk at 108. That leaves roughly 205 targets left for Ingram and Jones. So I have Jones at 105 and Ingram roughly about 100 next season. So yeah, I do think that it will come in around this. I could be wrong. There's also ETN and all the other, Tank Bigsby and all that in there, but they're not even close to this amount. So, that's why I only did these 4. So yeah, I do think that it will probably be Ridley, Kirk, Jones, Ingram.
And you said, so like with Ridley, I think you said 120. Is that correct? Yeah. Do you, this is a 2-part question. Do you expect to see the Ridley that we saw near the end of his Falcons time where he was starting to take over that number 1 role? Obviously that was still developing. And also considering ADP, a conversation we had pre-show here. Do you prefer Ridley at 30.7, wide receiver 16, Kirk at 50.7, wide receiver 27, or Zay at 123.6, wide receiver 57?
So I mean, oh yeah, it really is. I mean, it's a huge drop, and they're both, Kirk and Ridley are roughly a round or 2 apart from each other based on, who you draft with. Honestly, I'm a little unsure just because, we see all these things with camp. He's been out of the league for 2 years. When he was out, he only played the 5 games, and those 5 games were questionable at best based on injury and based on, a few other things as well. So we're just starting to get him back because he's coming back from his suspension. But all the clips that we see in camp, and we were talking about this before, and he looks fast. Yeah. He just looks fast, and he looks quick and shifty. So I have no doubt that and very hungry. So I feel like he does have that ability to be healthy this season. I think, and I already said that he's going to have the 120 this season. So for me, I'd prefer Kirk at cost. I'm just one of those players, one of those fantasy people that like getting my guys at cost comparatively. So if I'm going to run like a 0 RB type build and I start with my 3 wide receivers and I get him as my 3rd, completely okay. I feel comfortable with that. If he's my, if I'm doing a hero RB and or a robust RB and I'm going, running back, and then all of a sudden I see Calvin Ridley there, I might be a little less, a little more hesitant. I don't want him as my wide receiver 1. I prefer him more as my 2, just because it would make me feel a little bit more. I think it's a little bit risky to go all in on the guy like that. I'd rather have a little.
That's why you're 1.
Yeah. So that's how I feel about it. But his own. I mean, I don't know how you guys feel about it.
No, I think there's points to be made here because Rob has. I don't know if I necessarily get super involved in it, but I know for a fact Rob has made these points about certain guys being his wide receiver 1 versus much more comfortable with him as a wide receiver 2. And when you're talking about Calvin Ridley, when you see that risk and you're like, well, I could take this risk at this cost for wide receiver 3 and feel great about it because the upside's there. But if that upside doesn't feel quite as there when you're taking him as that top 12 position as your wide receiver 1, then it does feel a little bit more risky. So
Mhm.
completely understand.
Yeah, and Mike, you brought up Evan Ingram. We were just kind of talking about him. He's coming off a really nice season where he was tight end 7, in which he was being drafted outside, tight end 20 last year. So what's kind of your expectations for him coming into this season now that we do have a Calvin Ridley there and all these other weapons kind of emerging?
I mean, I'm much higher on him than most. I don't think it really, I don't think it hurts that much. I do think it helps in some ways, because he is, Ridley is not Marvin Jones, and he's definitely a little bit more of a presence there, which means coverage kind of pulls off of him a little bit. So for me, I see him as a tight end that I'm targeting in most of my drafts, and especially in all my best ball drafts. He just seems to fall in that perfect 7th, 8th round, area where I want him. So for me, he's priced perfectly. He's, tight end 6 to 9 based on who you follow. Right now I have him at tight end 6, in my rankings. But for me, I like him because he fits that dead zone, like wide receiver area where, you get these guys that you're not too comfortable grabbing. I like him just right where he is. I think he's doing just fine. And I think he'll do fine in this offense. I mean, I projected him at 100 targets. He had 98 last season. I think that he could be around that. And, only, touchdown, positive touchdown regression in the context, with another year in this particular offense, another year with Trevor Lawrence and, the same offense. This offense is going to be just clicking on all cylinders. I think it's
Contract
going to be
extension.
Oh, that
Just
too.
going to say.
Keep forgetting about that. I mean,
Spices.
and if you guys haven't, you need to watch he was on a podcast for the Second Win. It's called the Second Win podcast with
I've been talking about this.
Yeah, you should watch it. He shows you how much he really enjoys playing in Jacksonville, and not that he didn't like playing in New York. Believe me, I loved him in New York. I was one of the few Giants fans that liked him.
Yeah,
but for me,
you feel like the Giants fans were out.
But everyone was out on him. They were really upset with him with his drops. He had a season of what he called the yips, and that's what it was. Like he had a rough little time in New York because New York is a little bit more everything is on the main stage. Like you're pretty much under a spotlight and everybody is like on you. So for me, I think that he kind of got his mind right in Jacksonville. He got everything kind of shaped out. He's working with one of the best quarterbacks out there. He has a good team around him, so he can find space. I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, that is a great call out because that podcast was very informative. It kind of gave you a glimpse behind the scenes of what Evan Ingram really thinks about this Jacksonville Jaguars offense and team as a whole, and it was super interesting. So definitely go listen to that. But let's kind of move on to the backfield with Travis Etienne. He had I would say better than expected rushing part of the season last year, but very underwhelming in the receiving work. He finished around RB23 last year in PPR. Do you think he's going to take a step forward in year 2? And now we know that Tank Bigsby's there, so there might be a little bit more competition than what he had last year. What are you thinking of Travis Etienne this year?
So this one was rough when I was looking it up and trying to have an idea of what I wanted to do for this. And to be honest, I have him at running back 16 in my ranking so far, but I think I'm a little higher than I should be. Honestly, I might be moving him down a smidge just because the Jags did a lot. They went out of their way to keep JaMychal Hasty, who did very well in their passing game last season. They drafted Tank Bigsby this year as well. They also went out and got a guy that you guys know very well and is incredibly underappreciated in Dearness Johnson. I love Dearness Johnson. I'm very surprised he's not a running back 1 in someone's team.
Never even looked that way. Don't know why.
I don't.
And I always thought it was us being biased. So I appreciate you saying that.
Oh, I think he's incredibly he's underappreciated, and I think he should get more runs somewhere. And I'm hoping he gets a little bit here. So, but the whole point is they brought in a bunch of people at running back because of something that I don't think they feel comfortable with Etienne. Sure. And I always look at the transactions, and I always look at those little things. Follow the money, as people say. It always read the tea leaves, and I have to temper my expectations a little bit.
This was an Urban pick, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it was
I
with
believe so. So
the
yeah.
I think it was both an Urban pick and a different GM. Am I wrong about that? Balky didn't come in till post Urban.
I think so, but
I'll double check.
it was
We
Urban.
can cut this.
No, you're good. Either way, it's definitely Urban Meyer's pick. But at the end of the day, I honestly think that Tank Bigsby could carve out a pretty decent role from this offense. So I'm tempering my expectations a little bit. He was in on about 669 snaps last season, so 60% of the time. So I see that decreasing just a smidge. And then they're going to probably be in somewhat of a time share with Bigsby. Bigsby's a good, talented pass catcher, and he's a little bigger than Travis Etienne as well. He's a little stockier and a little bit, he just looks good, young, fast, and can catch. So I think he's going to take a little bit of a step back. I prefer him as an RB2, like a low-end RB2, comparatively to a low-end RB1.
Yeah.
Just as clarification, Balky was hired January 21st, 2021. So I think he was a Balky pick. Maybe Urban pushed him that way. But no, I've actually had some of the same concerns as you're mentioning here. I do feel I actually think Bigsby might be the biggest concern out of the backfield, just because I know Jermichael and Dearness, they're both undervalued, underappreciated, and I don't think they ever get that full capacity to show themselves. Tank, however, could get some work. That isn't the biggest concern for me, though, honestly, because I think the biggest concern in general is that they just don't necessarily feel Travis Etienne as a huge pass catcher. And that's what we've all been expecting.
He only had 2 targets each game. Like he was very underused, more than we thought he would.
It's so surprising, and I don't know if you recently saw, he said, we as running backs need to elevate our game. And that kind of got me excited, but I'm still out on him. And he was one of my favorite guys. He would be considered my guy for me last year. So, do you think Bigsby, I know you kind of touched on this, so I'm just going to quickly ask, do you think Bigsby eats into any of this workload, or is he purely a handcuff stash here?
I think it kind of eats into him. I think that he's a solid handcuff, but at the same time could turn into a flex play later in the season. I think that he's someone that you can definitely draft and feel feel safe with him on your bench to kind of wait it out and see if he can kind of, get himself into a role for this particular team. I think he can. I think he can definitely take a little bit of the passing work out of Travis Etienne's workload. And we're going to probably see Travis as more of a runner and, 22 touches a game, 25, maybe something like that. And hopefully he can make enough of them because he's got someone on his back. Maybe the competition's a good thing for Travis Etienne in a way to kind of show, because last year he didn't really have much behind him other than Jermichael Hasty. So, or Snoop Connor.
Maybe light a fire.
Yeah. So we'll see. But I think that
another
Tank
year
is
off
a good
injury
handcuff.
too.
Yeah. Oh, another year. Well, and I was very off the Liz Frank injury for many reasons. My wife had a car accident, and I asked in the middle of a doctor's appointment about that.
Is this bad? Did she have a Liz? You're saying from her accident? Okay.
And from that, the doc, I asked the orthopedic surgeon the day of her accident. I'm like, so how does this injury affect people and like NFL players? And because you just said career ending, and I'm like, and he's like, well, and my wife got so upset, it was funny. And it's a true story.
That's a great story.
That's awesome.
I do have another question. Out of this everybody that we talked about from the Jacksonville Jaguars, is there anybody else on this team you're interested in?
Not really. I mean, all the guys that we kind of talked about were the guys that should be the top guys on the team. The only guy that I might add to it, it's based on your league settings and formats. If you have return yards, I would say Agnew. He would be somebody, but other than that, I'm pretty much, and he's more of like a fun stash for like bigger benches and like dynasty rosters if they include that. But other than that, no, I think everyone else is pretty good.
Yeah, awesome. I think you hit on, the big ones that are going to get the target share, that are going to be fantasy relevant. I'm with you on that. And then we have one last question, and then we'll get you out of here because I know you got a lot of stuff going on. Who are your plant the flag players this year, regardless of team? Who are the players that you are trying to draft on every one of your fantasy football teams this year?
Okay, so I have at least 3 for each position. I'm sorry. So I got Deontay Johnson. He's probably one of my favorites. I'm trying to grab him anywhere I can. I have him on my Scotty Fishbowl team. Jahan Dotson is another guy that I really like a lot for the Commanders. And then we also, one of my favorite late round guys is Nico Collins for the Texans. These 3 guys, I want every time. They're consistent. Yeah. They are just good floor plays. I like floor plays a little more than the guys that, the big high ceiling, flash good guys.
Point. The Will Fullers.
Yeah, the Will Fullers of the world. For tight end, I love Sam Laporta. I am just on board this. He is definitely someone I want everywhere. Dalton Schultz is the other tight end that I have. He is probably one of my favorites. You'll see a theme shortly of players that I'm picking, which is kind of funny. I did the Jags. Next is Dameon Pierce, is a running back that I really am high on this year. I think that team is going to be.
Should have had you on for the Texans.
I know. I said it after the fact. But yeah, I like him a lot too. Miles Sanders is another guy that I'm really high on this season. And David Montgomery is another flag plant that I like. Ryan Reese of Club FF. I've been, chatting with him, and that's one guy he can't get enough of, and he's starting to turn me to the dark side. So I'm liking, David Montgomery a lot, and it's also based on cost. The other one, or for quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson. I like him a lot. I think he can do well. I'm bringing this to you guys because of the fact you guys are Browns fans.
Gotta love it.
But I really like him this year. Geno Smith is probably the other guy. He is my big other flag plant. He went in the 13th round of a mock that we did last week.
Oof.
I don't understand how he went in the 13th round. But that is another guy. So those are my flag plants of, players.
You hit a lot of our Dad Bod flag plants as well. If I would say we had like a consensus flag plant, you hit a lot of them.
Nice.
Both you and not to like separate this, but both the Robs would have absolutely loved all of that list.
That's why I'm like, grinning ear to ear.
Yeah, I know. Every time I said a pick, I just saw Rago.
Everyone used
dude, just almost everywhere there. I will say the one guy that's absolutely growing out of that list is Nico Collins for me. Yeah. I think he's a rank that I want to adjust. I get suckered into the very exciting stories like OC's got him watching Julio Jones Jones film. Like that stuff excites me. Like do I like the creativeness. I feel like it's a different dedication. It's a different approach. And those things always stand out to me. So, and I mean, their new head coach is going to be.
Oh yeah. I love D'Amico Ryans. I think he's going to be something. And I think as everyone focuses on guys like Mechie and his, great story that he's coming back, and, people are thinking of Tank Dell and, Robert
even
Woods,
Xavier Hutchinson,
or even Xavier Hutchinson. I'm like, hey, forget about Nico Collins. Let me pick him up. And he's that, Dalton Schultz. I just think this is a good year for this offense. I think CJ Stroud is a little bit better than people think he is. And I think that they're going to use him correctly to, just distribute the ball well. Everything's going to be a little bit more underneath than I think he can throw deep, of course, but I think that he'll live in that underneath. And all those players, I even love Devin Singletary. Like those guys, all the guys on that offense, I'm pretty comfortable with.
I love it.
We absolutely should have had you on for the Texans. No, I'm kidding. Mike, thank you so much for coming on, dude. We really love having you. We'll have to get you back for the regular season. We truly, truly appreciate it, man. You bring the knowledge, you bring the heat every time you're on here. Before we let you go, if we didn't mention it, or if you want to plug it again, please let the people know where they can find you. And do you have anything coming up that they could look out for?
Yeah, we do actually. So starting Monday, July 31st, we will be running our Mock of Champions. Basically, we do a mock Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. From those, we pick the top 3.
It's tomorrow.
Correct.
We're not recording.
Yeah, that's why I said it that way.
Yeah, my bad.
But no, we basically are running a mock every day. And basically the top 3 of all those mocks will be going to a mock on Friday. And everyone from that Friday show, the top 3 from those get to go to a best ball tournament that will set up for everybody for a chance to win $50 or more. We'll figure out the more later. But at this point, you at least get $50 from us. So we'll, put you guys into that. So that's what we're starting. You can find me on Twitter at Classic Mike GRFN. You can find us. The company brand is Get Right FF on Twitter. Follow my buddy Rasta, my co-host. He's on there too. We have all of our tags and stuff on our main page. I can't remember all his. It's Rastafarian with a 1 in there. So, but he's great. Dustin and Frank. So, check that out. Check out our website, which is getrightff.com. We have our rankings that are going to be posted there as well. Other than that, we're going to be running Fridays and Monday, and then we're going to go in season Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I'll be on Sunday mornings to give you guys all the info. We also have a private sleeper channel, which is kind of like our Discord, but it's, I don't have to play around with it. It's easy. It's all set up. We do injury alerts and all that fun stuff. So check us out. Everything's on our YouTube channel. Definitely check us out on YouTube. We're almost at 1,000. So check us out there.
And subscribe.
Yes, please subscribe.
Smash that button.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike.
All right, next up, we have another incredible guest for you guys. He's a noted running back enthusiast and college prospect analyst. He also has some of the absolute best prospect threads on all of Twitter. You can find him on all his work over at FTN Fantasy, where he's a featured analyst and co-hosts the FTN Fantasy Dynasty podcast. You can also find him over on Twitter at PopesFFH. It's time to welcome an amazing analyst, even better guy to the show, Jeremy Popes. How are you doing tonight, man?
I'm good. I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about the Houston Texans. Hopefully I don't, give anything away in the lead there, but I appreciate the nice words, but I'm excited. The Texans are fun. They're not my team, but I do like CJ Stroud, so this will be fun.
Yeah, it's actually something you mentioned pre-show of talking about CJ Stroud being kind of one of the guys you end up having on Dynasty quite a bit. And I think we could take a wild guess that the Texans aren't yours based on the background there.
You couldn't tell?
But we did. So talking about the Texans, they are also a team that I have weirdly become more and more excited with each week, even though we saw Stroud kind of struggle in preseason 1. I'm not worried, but I've been thinking about this team a lot and all the additions they've made to the offense, defense, the new head coach. So specifically, they lost Brandon Cooks. They added C.J. Stroud, Dalton Schultz, Devin Singletary, Robert Woods, Tank Dell, Xavier Hutchinson, Jimmy Ward, Sheldon Rankins, Will Anderson, Shaquille Griffin. Like they added a ton in the draft. They added a ton in the offseason. What are your expectations for this season for the Texans?
Yeah, I expect it to still be kind of one of those gelling type of years. I would say they're probably going to be a little bit better than last season, but not much. Although they don't have their first-round pick, I think they're going to be giving Arizona probably a top 10 pick again this year. Maybe they're a little bit better than that, but I don't expect a ton. Like you had said, we kind of saw C.J. Stroud, quote-unquote, struggle there in that first portion of the preseason game against the Patriots, but I do think there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve here, kind of just adjusting to the NFL game, not having necessarily an elite offensive line like he did at Ohio State, stuff like that. So I do expect that there to be some bumps in the road here for this Texans offense and defense.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. And you kind of hit on Stroud a little bit, kind of what you're expecting a little bit from him in his rookie year. What kind of numbers are you expecting from him in his rookie year? And you think he has any fantasy relevance as a rookie?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some fantasy relevance. I'm probably higher than him on the consensus, at least even for this season and for just long-term value. I do think he could kind of be like a quarterback too if you're playing in super flex leagues or 2 quarterback teams. I think he's like a mid to low-end quarterback too. He kind of gives me, like the Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr vibes that they've kind of been where they've hovered around quarterback 12 for a long time. That seems like his ceiling to me. I don't think he really gets up into that upper top 5 tier I mean, maybe he does, but I don't think he's necessarily Joe Burrow or, Justin Herbert that's really going to pass for this absurd amount of yardage to kind of push himself up there because he doesn't offer us a ton in the run game. So for me, I do think that he's going to kind of be a low-end quarterback to similar to, I'd say, like a Trevor Lawrence type rookie season is kind of what I'm expecting out of CJ Stroud. And I believe Lawrence was like QB 18, if not correct me, but I do think he was somewhere around in that range as a rookie. So
Yeah.
So there's going to be value, but not anything that I'm running to if I'm playing in one quarterback leagues.
What's super interesting about what you said is we watched, we're from Ohio, so we watched that national championship game where we were like, oh my God, CJ Stroud is really running the ball this game. And you look at the stat line at the end and it's like 42 rushes. And you're like, what? Dude, I thought he had like close to 100. He looked like he was running all over the place.
Yeah, it's like that old, wasn't there that one play from Kyler where he ran like 100 yards but only gained like 3, and you're like running sideline to sideline. It was like something like that. That's what Stroud did look like in that game.
Yeah.
He was running for his life. He kind of even looked like that in the Patriots game early on. I mean, he was kind of all over. The Texans' offensive line's
a little bit rough. So, I know we're talking Texans here, and we're talking Stroud, but we really need to kind of also branch off into kind of what he's working with here. So the offensive line's a struggle. In addition to that, are we set at tight end? So we have Dalton Schultz now. He finished as tight end 9, tight end 5 the last 2 seasons with Dallas. Do we see a dip in his game? Is he going to be relevant for fantasy in 2023?
With Dalton Schultz, it's a curious case for me. I started the offseason not loving it. I've kind of come on a little bit to it just because I don't know who's really their receiver at the moment. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that here in a few minutes, but there's no real proven guy in this receiver room. So Schultz could become a very good potential to lead this team in targets / receptions. With that, I would think he's going to get up to that tight end 9. Pretty simple finish for most tight ends nowadays, especially with the caliber of Dalton Schultz. The question I really am going to see is with the offensive line struggling, Schultz is a decent blocker, and is he going to be a guy that's a casualty to that and required to kind of stay in and block a little bit extra to kind of give Stroud some extra time on maybe some of those deeper, longer developing routes. Also, there are a lot of players in that receiver room that are young and explosive, and maybe we just see those guys see the targets as opposed to Dalton Schultz, who's not as exciting of a pass catcher or creating after the catch as the others who we'll talk about here in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, let's kind of bring in those others because I really kind of want to know every single one of them could be a value, right? They go so late in drafts, and John Mechie goes late. He's currently my personal favorite. Nico Collins goes late. Robert Woods probably goes undrafted. Tank Dell is probably close to undrafted, if not undrafted. And Xavier Hutchinson's definitely undrafted in redraft. Are there any that you're, and I know you already mentioned you're not certain about who their guy is. Is there any that you're taking stabs at as a sleeper coming out for their wide receivers? Are you fading all of them?
I'm actually in on pretty much all of them, depending on where they go. Like Nico Collins, definitely very interesting. He kind of has that big play, contested catch type of role. Could be definitely deadly in the red zone. But the question really comes is, does that game fit what they want to do in the offensive scheme? And from what we saw early on, at least in this Patriots game, like Tank Dell was in there the longest outside of Xavier Hutchinson. So the question is he that low on the depth chart, or do they like what they've seen and they kind of wanted to be like, hey, let's see what he looks like longer with some different parts of the offense? So my question really is it going to be Tank Dell or John Mechie? Like, those are the two I really want, just because I feel like those two pair to Stroud's game a little bit better, kind of get the ball out quick, get them in stride and on the run, and they can create after the catch, which I think Dell and Mechie do really well. So I'm going to say that it's going to be potentially one of those. The only issue is that I think Collins and Woods will be your top 2 out there in 2 receiver sets, which could become an issue for Dell and Mechie as far as consistency for fantasy. But like you said, these guys are super late in your drafts. Like, I'm not going to probably draft Tank Dell. I guess maybe in the last pick if I wanted to go with a receiver. but I tend to lean running backs once I get that late in redraft drafts because you never know when the running backs tend to.
Yeah, the dart throws are
Just
easier.
the injuries are more likely to come at the running back position, which is sad, but like it does, and that's where the opportunity comes from, as opposed to one of these receivers hitting that late in the draft. So most likely it's Nico Collins. That's kind of where I'm at. He just seems like the guy. And Robert Woods just doesn't excite me. I think he'll be on the field a lot, and he's just going to hurt Mechie and Dell as far as getting on the field and being consistent in 2023.
Yeah, no, I think you made a lot of great points, especially like with the running back thing late in drafts. Like I think it's such a great point to emphasize. Like for me, I'm always taking a ton of running backs late in drafts, handcuff guys, and guys that you think basically, hey, this guy, he could be leading all the waiver wire articles when the guy ahead of him goes down. That's the guy you want to get out ahead of. So
It's RB1.
yeah, exactly.
But it is like Rob said, you want to be ahead on the curve with that because trying to get him on the waiver. If you play fab, like depends on what you're going to have when that injury occurs, or depending on whether or not the waiver wire, depending if you won that week or not. So for me, I usually lean towards those running backs so the receivers don't fall off, but I have been taking him a little bit late this year, like Puka Nacua. I know he's not a Ram, or he's not a Texan. Jesus.
Texan.
Yeah, whatever. One of those teams. But like some of these receivers are interesting a little bit later, just because there is so much upside and not really any proven targets in these rooms. And if one of them becomes a guy, like Tank Dell looked good. I know he was out there a long time, but he looked good. He looked like he could handle it.
Small.
Although undersized, like he looked like he could handle it to an extent. But it's that day and age where the size is going down a little bit in the league.
Well,
I just feel like you're seeing the production out of these smaller guys. The game's a lot faster and quicker, and not as much as that downhill thumping style anymore. And
Not
you're
the,
seeing like Deuce Vaughn looks pretty good in his limited touches.
Jeez, doesn't he?
Tucker, Kelvin Austin, like all these guys coming out this year's year. Blake Corum, like there's a ton of guys that are undersized that are just these quick, explosive athletes, and it's seeming to transition. Devon Achane's a big one this year in Miami. Like it seems like it's starting to translate a little bit, but for the receivers, I think it's less to worry about than running backs. So he definitely interests me.
Such a great point because look at is it 3 out of the 4 receivers were technically undersized in the first round. Quentin Johnson was the only one that's pretty. Zay Flowers small. All 3 of those guys, it's smaller.
Technically a smaller, lighter frame. I think he's still 6 foot, but he's a lighter frame. JSN's a little stockier, but
yeah. It's interesting how this is transitioning, and we saw it the biggest this draft. Agree.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of great points, and you kind of hit a little bit, with the backfield. This backfield is a little bit divisive, just because Dameon Pierce, he was 3rd round last year, rookie, but they have a new regime in there, and they brought a new guy in there, so he looked good. But at the same time, we got these things. So where do you have Pierce ranked among running backs for fantasy for 2023?
So I have him as an RB2. I will pull it up right this second. He is 24 for me at the moment. That could obviously change, but I just really anticipate this to be kind of a running back by committee to an extent. Pierce obviously will probably lead it, but Devin Singletary is a lot better than people give him credit for. So for me, he's probably more of a fade-ish at his ADP. He's not a guy I run to the podium to draft when I'm on the clock. It's likely somebody that I'm going to pivot to a different position, just where he's at. It seems like I'm going with other players in a round or 2 ahead of him. So at this point, I'm ready to look to tight end or wide receiver in the draft.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, a lot of people talk about the running back dead zone, right? So that's always, but I feel like this year it's kind of running backs have been pushed down, especially on underdog drafts. So it's kind of like the dead zone of running backs is like going a round or 2 later. But I kind of think he's like part of that, where it's like you get to that point and, he has somewhat projectable volume in a sense, but at the same time, I personally, I'm with you. Like, I would much rather take a wide receiver or tight end in that range, like with a lot of upside, rather than go with Pierce when I feel like I can get like a possible running back with more upside. May not be as much projectable volume right away, but more possible upside a few rounds later, even. So, I think that's what we're seeing a lot of this year. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And like, there's guys that I like I said, like a round or two sooner. Like, it's kind of not necessarily that dead zone, but like a guy that I want, like I want Joe Mixon, I want Aaron Jones. I'd rather take the stab on Jahmyr Gibbs or Miles Sanders. Honestly, I'd rather have James Cook. Like, there's a lot of guys that I think, even Alvin Kamara, like I'd rather have Alvin Kamara. Like, I know he's going to miss the first 3 weeks, but after that, like, he looks good in that preseason game, and like, I want the player to be good when the playoffs come around. Like, obviously, you got to make the playoffs, but like, I'm building the team to win once the playoffs come around, and Alvin Kamara's going to do that. Like, Dameon Pierce, although he had some injuries, kind of started to wear down a bit at the end of the season.
Sure did.
Tends to kind of be the thing with rookie running backs at times, just because the season's a bit longer in the NFL. But also, Pierce's running style is just so physical. We also saw him with some injuries in there, and I don't anticipate him changing that. So I do think that they kind of do limit his touches a little bit. So I just, as a guy who's not a full workhorse on a team that wasn't overly productive on a yards per touch basis, and he was forced to break so many tackles, like, yeah, this offense might be a little bit better, but they're still developing, and CJ Stroud is going to have a ton of question marks. It might be a rough season, you know. I mean, he hasn't had to face this level of competition regularly with an offensive line and a lack of a supporting cast. I mean, I'll be the first one to admit it. I love CJ Stroud, but like playing with, you know, JSN, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Marvin Jr. Harrison, and Mika Buka, like the list goes on. Julian Fleming, like, I mean, this was
Jameson, Jameson for a year. I think it was like the 4-string
loaded wide receiver room. So
yeah,
what is this offense really going to be? You know, it's the first year for this coaching staff. So there's a lot of other guys I'd rather have than Dameon Pierce, and but I also like wasn't super high on Dameon Pierce coming out, so I should probably add that in there.
No, it definitely makes sense. Like, I'm with you on that. And so you kind of hit on Devin Singletary a little bit. How you know, people kind of give him a rough time. He's got a bad rap but like you said, he's been better than people give credit for. So is he someone? Yeah, is he someone that you kind of find yourself taking later in drafts?
Yeah. So in this situation where I have these guys very similarly in a level, like I don't have them ranked close to each other, but I view them fairly close to each other as far as like not necessarily a full-on 1A, 1B. It's more of like a, you know, 60-40 split probably. I'm going to lean towards the cheaper option in drafts just because, like we'd mentioned, there's that injury risk, etc. But like you can get Devin Singletary like 3, 4, 5 rounds later than Dameon Pierce. And Singletary, like you had said, Mario, is very efficient lately. He can make guys miss in the phone booth. He doesn't have that breakaway speed, but he was very good for the Bills in a short period of time. He has shown that he can catch passes to an extent. I just think that they're going to use him a little bit more than what people probably want as far as like when we draft Dameon Pierce. So I think that, yeah, there's no real standalone value to Devin Singletary, but he's kind of one of those handcuffs that could have some blow-up weeks in the pinch and be really a guy that I really want I shouldn't say once, but if something happens to Dameon Pierce and he's the guy, I definitely want that, because now one of the equation is gone. You know, if Singletary was to get hurt, then like Dameon Pierce skyrockets. Like on weekly, he'll probably be like a top 15 running back I'll rank on a weekly basis if Singletary was to go down. But if they're both healthy and both playing, they're both going to be like mediocre.
Yeah.
I think there's some indication on a couple things here. Singletary being signed as early as he did in this offseason with the running back class that was in the free agency was pretty insane, in the sense of like they were confident in signing him. They didn't wait for a couple other guys. They didn't try to match any certain tenders. Like it was pretty insane that they brought him in, signed him quick. I think that bodes to both their confidence in Dameon Pierce and Devin Singletary. Like, I think it says something to both of them. I mean, they're a team that has some money to spend. Obviously, the whole motto with NFL teams is let's not spend on RBs. But I still think signing him that quick with what we saw was coming out was pretty impressive and kind of should boost some confidence in Singletary. Anyone else on this team we should be keeping an eye out for, like that we haven't mentioned? We've covered a lot of people in this quick time, but just or anybody that you want to highlight. It's really up to you.
If for redraft, probably not. One guy that's interesting is like Noah Brown. He's in that wide receiver room that wasn't really mentioned, but he didn't.
Another OSU receiver.
Yeah, he didn't play, nor did Robert Woods in their first preseason game. So if that's any indication, he might be further up the depth chart than we think. He is coming off a career best season with the Cowboys. It wasn't anything special, but he's an athletic guy, a little bit bigger, kind of played inside the slot and outside for the Cowboys last year at times. So could maybe be something. Again, it would be tough for me to draft him in redraft just because
just like keep an eye out for him.
Round,
sneaky
but with
eye.
how short drafts are, like I'd rather probably take a Ty Chandler or a Jerome Ford or somebody like that in the last round opposed to him. But he could be a guy that kind of emerges as having a couple weeks here or there of fantasy relevancy in this offense.
A little interesting best ball plug, maybe.
Yeah, that would actually best ball would be a good call.
Yeah, especially if
real late.
Yeah, I think it's the last round, and you could probably get them every time
Free.
Free. Who are your flag plant players on the season? Not just within the Texans, obviously, and you could give us 1, 2, 3, whatever you want to give.
So J.K. Dobbins, if you can't tell, the other shoulder. I'll go with him. I'll go with James Cook. I'm gonna go with Elijah Moore.
Ooh,
exceeds his ADP.
Wait, are those okay? Are those Bills helmets back there, or are they OSU and Browns? Because there's been a couple comments here that I'm pretty convinced you're an Ohioan with us.
No, I'm not an Ohioan. I am actually in Western New York, very close to the Bills Stadium, and they are Bills helmets. But that is a J.K. Dobbins jersey.
There's been a couple OSU guys you've been hyping up. Hit us with the Browns guy.
I don't have. I'm wearing an Oregon shirt, so maybe I should be talking about like Justin Herbert. But I just
Mariota the backup.
I just like running backs, and OSU turns them out.
Yeah.
And, I can't help it.
And they're wide receivers.
They got a good college program. I'm not gonna argue it. I've got
that
the
they do.
University of Buffalo. We got Khalil Mack. That's about all that we've got. Jared Patterson. He was pretty good for a hot minute. So.
Oh yeah, week 17 stud, Jarrett Patterson.
Yeah, he has
2021.
He scored 8 rushing touchdowns in a game.
Wow.
Like 600 yards. It was absurd. I believe those are right.
That's unreal.
I think he went off week 17. I think he was a good 18 to 20 points
2
years ago. Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
I benched him. Lost my championship. Never forget
he was
Jarrett Patterson.
I wouldn't have started him either.
He was a hot.
But I've been like, yeah, just chalk that one up.
That's true. Those are the ones you just take.
I'm holding a lot of pain here, guys.
Yeah,
it hurts.
and then my last flag plan, I'll come back to Buffalo. I'll say Dalton Kincaid.
Oh,
I think he has a pretty big year.
I like it.
That's awesome.
Some spice. But yeah, Jeremy, we just want to say, again, we can't thank you enough for joining us. Talk some Houston Texans, some fantasy football with us. It's been our pleasure. Before we let you go, though, do you want to let the viewers know where they can find you, all your content? You got anything that you're coming soon that you'd like to promote?
Yeah, for sure. You'd mentioned it. My Twitter's at PopesFFH. Pretty much everything you can find there. I'll have links and stuff to all my articles, stuff like that. But if you want to, ftnfantasy.com is where all my articles are. And really, I'm kind of pushing some, as crazy as this sounds, 2024 rookie stuff. It's a project pretty near to me. I'm doing pretty much everything for it. So my threads, Rob, that you mentioned earlier, Twitter has not been so good since it's been taken over, and I lost a lot of them this year. So we're moving them to article form. So they're pretty much write-ups on that, with some clips and stuff that I'll put on Twitter, and it links back to it in the articles. They are free as of right now. So nice to check them out if you want to get a jump start on the 2024 class if you do play Dynasty or just like college football in general.
That's awesome, dude. That's early. That's getting people to jumpstart. Like, should I trade for some 2024 picks?
Yeah. I'll start out and say yeah.
Yeah,
I know it's
for
said
sure.
every
All
year,
right,
but-
dude. We're in the
Go
Dynasty League now. I'm going to start tanking. If you see my team start tanking, you're the reason.
All right. I wouldn't blame you. I'm just saying. It's a really good class. You'll see. If they all declare,
Awesome.
I'll say that. But
We'll be on the lookout for that, and I'll have to chat with you offline to see if we could get it posted on our page somewhere as well, man. But we appreciate your time.
yeah, thank you. I appreciate having me on.
Next up, we will be talking the Tennessee Titans with special guest and longtime Titans fan Charles Burba. Dude, how are you?
Doing great. Doing great.
I
Great to
pronounced
be
that
here.
last name right?
Yeah. Hey.
Okay.
Hey. Punctuality. You said it perfectly. Thank you.
So in pre-show, you were telling me a huge Titans fan. You bleed. It's blue and white, the baby blue and white, right? Like you cut your finger and it's just gushing blue and white, dude.
Two-tone blue. Two-tone blue.
Two-tone blue.
Two-tone blue.
That's awesome, man. So we are gonna get into the Tennessee Titans. I'm really excited to have you. You reached out, I think it was last season, said, "Hey, I want to hop on there. Let me on." And I was like, "Dude, get a mic and we'll be there." And you're like, "All right." And then you're like, "Hey, I completely forgot about this, but I'm ready." And I'm like, "All right, let's do it, man."
I didn't even have a mic, and I was like, "Hey, I'm ready." Oh, I need a mic. Oh, you're right. I do. I need a mic because how am I going to do this if I don't have a mic? But yeah, hey, I got a mic. They're not super expensive for anybody out there. They're not super expensive. Mine was only $50. You can start
I think
out.
that's what mine was. Yep.
Yeah. I got the blue.
That's mine. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the stand. So I think I had to spend another 15 on the arm, but
Yeah.
besides the point, we are definitely talking Tennessee Titans right now. We saw some departure, Robert Woods, which really didn't pan out. Austin Hooper, another one that didn't really pan out. Added DeAndre Hopkins, Tyjae Spears, Andre Dillard. What are your expectations this season for the Titans?
Expectations, in my eyes, I see at least 10 wins. At least 10
Ooh,
wins. Like,
it is
yeah,
week
at
two.
least 10 wins. I'm thinking at least playoffs because like every single I don't know if anybody's watched the Titans, but last year we had a hot streak where we went 7-2 and then we lost every game after it. 7-2.
Which didn't have
we lost.
Tannehill in a lot of those too, right?
Exactly. Yeah. As soon as we went on that hot streak, we started to fall off. We had a couple of games in the beginning. We seen where we were okay, but the Bills, we knew immediately we were not ready for the playoffs. The Bills smoked us. I can't remember the numbers statistically. It was horrible though. It was a bad day to watch as a Titans fan. It was like 42-10 or 42-17, something like that. Josh Allen threw like 300 yards on us. I was crying, but it was okay.
That secondary had its struggle, definitely the second half too. I remember using a lot of DFS plays against the Tennessee. Not rushing though. Couldn't get anything on the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mentioned Tannehill. The last 3 seasons, we've seen him QB9. He went off, I think that was 2020, QB14, QB23 last year. Which of these like 3 seasons do you think he's closer to at this point when we're talking fantasy?
I'd probably say QB14, but
Okay.
that's a big if. So he still has, he doesn't have, he has now DeAndre Hopkins. So he had D-Hop in the offseason, like you said. He lost Robert Woods, but he wasn't really a non-factor anyway. Austin Hooper, he made like one big catch last year, but he wasn't, he mainly helped in the blocking scheme. As far as what he's going to do, it's just if his surrounding cast can stay healthy. As long as Treylon Burks, Chiga Okonkwo, Tyjae Spears, as long as those guys can stay healthy, he's well on his way to be QB9.
Yeah, there's an amazing value with Tannehill right now. I think a lot of times when you add a stud wide receiver, I think you usually see the QB kind of jump up in rankings. And with Tannehill, it's understandable, but he hasn't really moved at all in ADP, and he's kind of going. I mean, I know obviously in most redraft leagues, undrafted, but in like best ball, it's like QB 23 or 24 is where he's being drafted right now. So it's still late. But if you have some faith in DeAndre, it's kind of like, well, why not stack that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he could definitely put together a couple of games where I would see it more late in the season, maybe even earlier. It just depends on if him and D-Hop kind of get a combination and just a work history together, which they've been working really hard in the offseason about it. Almost every single day, it's Tannehill and D-Hop making sure that they're actually getting that connection good.
Let's talk about that a little bit more. So talking about the addition of DeAndre Hopkins, he's been a stud when healthy in his career. And even last year averaged nearly 17 fantasy points per game after his 6-game suspension and finished as the wide receiver 9, not overall, but in points per game. Where do you think he falls this year? Is he a target for you in fantasy drafts, or is he a fade for you? His current ADP is wide receiver 25, 45.6. So roughly, I want to say that's fourth round, mid fourth.
Yeah. I mean, I would maybe say fifth round ish.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not really high on D-Hop, and the main reason why, and this is just a spectacle of what if. So Tim Kelly came in, he's the new addition, and it depends on how he's actually going to throw the ball. If he throws the ball more, obviously D-Hop's going to be good, but we still have Traylon Burks, and Tannehill averages about 450 attempts a year. So it's mainly Derrick Henry on that offense. So I'm not really high on D-Hop.
You mentioned Traylon Burks. He's a guy that I've actually been a huge fan of, and it kind of bummed me out that he already got hurt. Nothing too serious. He should be back hopefully by week 1, maybe week 2, maybe week 3, somewhere right around there. He was getting a lot of love before Hopkins signed. Do you think like the Hopkins, I mean, you just kind of mentioned it, Tannehill we're hoping that we see a little bit more passing in this offense with the new OC Kelly. Do you think Hopkins signing turns Burks into a fade, or are you buying the dip in ADP right now? And he's going closer to like 8th, 9th round, maybe 7th, 8th, actually.
This is going to be a surprising one, but I think actually Burks is going to do better than D-Hop this year. And the reason why is because he's younger, he's faster, he's more athletic. D-Hop is going to guard. He's going to mainly get those double coverages. And then we got then we have Chig Okonkwo, who's going to get a couple of targets as well from the middle linebackers. So it's going to clear up a little bit of space for Traylon Burks. So I think he's going to be actually a little bit better than D-Hop this year.
I love D-Hop, but I want to see the good, and I think this is so biased because I own Traylon Burks in Dynasty. I want to see the upside of like, I think this could be better for Traylon Burks. I don't know if he would fit me personally. I don't know if I think he would finish higher than D-Hop, but like I wanted to believe that the signing was good for him. I wanted to think that it was.
It's developmentally. So I mean, you look at this is the best case scenario, and this is what I look at. So you had Juju Smith-Schuster, his rookie year, right? His rookie year in comparison to Antonio Brown, and then you got Juju Smith-Schuster, right? Yep. Juju went off his rookie year because Antonio Brown was getting most of those coverages. If you take the same scenario, Traylon Burks is pretty much in his rookie year in comparison, because he didn't really play his rookie year.
No, he missed, I think, 7 games, and it was right in the middle. The team, offensively, just fell apart towards the end, so it didn't even matter when he came back. It's sort of the same thing. You mentioned this guy a couple times now, Chig Okonkwo. I probably butchered that last name. I usually just say Chig. People were really excited, and he's dropped quite a bit, a few rounds since the signing of D-Hop. Is he like a late round target for you in the tight end position?
Yeah, I got him stashed away. The only reason I say that is because, I mean, Titans are really big on running the ball and blocking with their tight ends. And then majority of the time, I've already seen it in one of these preseason games where they had the tight end actually come out on double coverage. He was unguarded. He made a catch, and it was Chigakonkwo. So I'd imagine he's going to have at least, I'd say, 4 to 5 targets a game, roughly.
Which is solid for a tight end. I think the backfield at this point is pretty straightforward. And it's obviously the big dog, King Henry. Are you worried about his age?
Not at all. No. Not at all. I'm
too big. He's too big to take down.
Too big. He didn't disappoint last year. He had over 300 carries, over 1,500 yards, over 10 touchdowns, right? And he was, 28 years old?
Oh, 28, 29, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Father Time, it's eventually going to hit him, but that broken foot looks good to me.
Dude, it's hard. I have convinced myself as well that I think Derrick Henry is kind of one of those once in a generation sort of running backs because we just don't get guys playing like this anymore. Yeah, he's 29 this season, so you're right, 28.
Yeah, and that type of production every single year. What people actually tend to forget too is, yes, Zeke started hotter, but the only reason Zeke started hotter is because Derrick Henry, he was behind DeMarco Murray his first 2 years. People forget that.
I know I don't want to get us off on the wrong foot here or on the wrong side, but AJ Dillon's always like my biggest comparison to Derrick Henry, which this would be the lineup year, I think, or actually lineup touches is what I've come to. Carries. AJ Dillon has exactly the amount of carries that Derrick Henry started going off with. So that's my weird conspiracy theory here. So Derrick Henry typically goes in late second round pick. So you'd be taking him there.
He went in my first. He was
home leagues are different, right?
Yeah. He was one of the first running backs off the board. I was like, it was CMC, Derrick Henry, and then
Eckler.
Barkley.
Saquon Barkley.
Saquon Barkley. Yeah. And I was surprised by that. I was like, so y'all picked Derrick Henry over Saquon Barkley? Barkley gets more catches. Why did y'all do that?
Home leagues.
Yeah.
Home leagues are wild. So I'm in Ohio. I never get Nick Chubb. Never.
I'm sorry,
not because I don't want to. Yeah, it's just too much. It's too early. It's like a round. Usually it's a round earlier.
Yeah. It happens.
Home court bias right there. It happens. Yeah. So Tajay, we talked about him. Does he have any standalone value, or are we just looking at him as like, if I draft Derrick Henry, I want this guy as my handcuff?
It's questionable, right? It's questionable. He could line up. I would think personally, I think he could line up in the slot because his hands are actually that good. So like what people they're not like taking into account is he's a very good receiving back. And then on top of it, he's already showed flashes in the last 20 miles per hour. So I mean, he's not only can he catch, he had a torn ACL. He doesn't have an ACL anymore, but he's still quick.
Hines Ward.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I
Still
love what you're saying there because like the Tennessee Titans were a prime team that did this. Dontrell Hilliard is who comes to mind. They started that. I think it was last year where it was like, does Dontrell Hilliard have some value here? Because I think he started off really hot in the first 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Well, if I'm not mistaken, I think he went to the Panthers, Dante Hilliard.
Yeah, I just am saying like maybe Spears can kind of fill in that role and maybe carve out a more consistent role of that. Yeah.
If not better, actually, because he's a little bit better than Hilliard. I mean, Hilliard had value and he was a really good back, but Spears, personally, I think he's a little bit better. And he's a rookie, so he's younger.
Is there anybody else on this team that you're like for fantasy that you're keeping an eye out for?
Fantasy.
That we haven't talked about, like maybe Nick Ikeen Westbrook, any of those guys on your radar?
No. I'm not trying to.
He's too buried now.
Look, we passed up on St. Brown for the Lions. The
Amon-Ra,
yeah,
God.
and that kills me every single time because knowing that we could have had St. Brown and AJ Brown at the same time, it kills me inside every single time.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a
That
good
AJ Brown trade's wild still.
yeah. I mean, all we got was a first round pick, basically.
You got Treylon Burks.
Yeah. I mean,
It could pay out.
Granted. Like, I do like Treylon. He's got all the capability. He has he has everything that you want out of a receiver. He's still young, so I can't complain about that. As long as he stays healthy, I think that's the biggest concern. As long as he stays healthy, he doesn't have his knee surgeries like AJ Brown, we're good.
Yeah.
We're good.
That's a good point. So the last question here, we've asked every guest that we've had on these divisional episodes. This is outside of the Tennessee Titans. Now, of course, you could pick one if you want to. Who are your flag plant or your my guy players on the year? Or 1, 2, 3, however many you want to name. Who are your like guys that you've noticed are on a lot of your fantasy football teams this season?
A lot of guys that are on my fantasy footballs. Surprisingly, I mean, this is coming from a Tennessee Titans fan. I think Anthony Richardson, I think he's going to do pretty good. And the reason I say that is because he's in a system where he can literally just run wild. Sure, he's going to throw interceptions. Sure, he's going to, have his rookie mistakes, but he's in a system that loves quarterbacks. The Colts love quarterbacks, so they're able to develop quarterbacks. The Titans, I mean,
they love King Henry.
We're the Mount Rushmore of running backs. We had Earl Campbell, Derrick Henry, Eddie George, Chris Johnson. We've never had that one true guy other than Warren Moon. And you can make an argument for Steve McNair. You can make an argument. But outside of that, like the Colts, Andrew Luck, and then Peyton Manning. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. Like Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning.
And Anthony Richardson. So you talk about like him developing, but we're also like the rushing upside that he brings to your fantasy football element, dude, could be huge.
Okay, so coming from the perspective of a Titans fan, that's going to be hard for them to adjust on a running quarterback who is over 240 pounds. So he's basically Derrick Henry running at you. But then if he gets scared or he's not feeling it, he can chuck it off. And not only that, he can chuck it off 60 yards easily. So if he can put it together, he's going to develop. You give him Stephon Diggs type player, it's going to be over.
Yeah. Yeah, I think he's a really interesting player to watch on the season. One of the guys on our shows, Rob Norton, loves him some Anthony Richardson, so he's right there with you. Charles, we just wanted to say thank you again so much for joining us. Talk Titans, talk fantasy football. It's truly been a pleasure. Before we let you go, I know this has kind of been something that you're maybe slowly getting into, kind of seeing it as a hobby and starting to kind of get into the fantasy football and the NFL and stuff. Is there anything that you're like, you're trying to look for people to start having you on the shows, or like, what would you like to plug here?
Sort of that. Yeah. Sort of that.
Yeah.
That was pretty much perfectly spot on. I'm more so just looking to hop on other people's platforms and fantasy football things and just
grow those skills. Yeah. Talk football, grow skills. Yeah. I like it a lot, man. Thank you so much for joining us. Seriously. Thank you for watching our episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you like and subscribe to our YouTube channel.
If you aren't already following us on Twitter, check us out at Dad Bod FS.
We'll be posting all of our best clips and videos to all of our social media: TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, Facebook, YouTube. You can find us on there at Dad Bod Fantasy Squad.
Lastly, if you'd rather just listen, we make sure we post our audio of each episode on all the major streaming platforms. Stick with us all season long so together we can count our trophies and not our calories.